Hello, hello, hello. Nicole Roberts Jones here, and welcome to Faith, Purpose, Profit, what I like to call FPP Live, a time where I connect your faith with your purpose and your profit so that you can become the highest and best version who God created you to be in this world. So, as you come in, those of you that come week after week, you know how I do. As my grandmother would say, don't come in this house and not speak. I'm trying to pull up my comments on the side over here so I can see your comments as we're live. Come on in, tell me hello, tell me name and where you're from. If I share anything that resonates with you, say ouch, give me some fire emojis, give me some hearts. Let me know what I'm sharing resonates with you. And if you find any value, share it. Share it. And the reason I ask you to share it is I'm not trying to build more likes, I'm not trying to grow my following, but what I am trying to do is be obedient. The thing that I'm called to do in this world is to hold the space for you to profit from your gift, to understand what your purpose is and go after the abundance that's tied to it. And so, how I get to be obedient is more people following this conversation, not following me, but getting to listen in. You never know who has been praying for this insight. So, that's why I ask you to share. So, share it in your network, share it in social media. Those of you that are watching on YouTube, share it so others too will be blessed from what I share. So, hey, Nikki and Renata and Yolanda. Hey, 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 y'all. So, with that said, our conversation for tonight is, will you crush your giant? Will you? Will you crush your giant? So, last week I started a conversation. This is the other end of that conversation. And I started sharing with you about David, as I talked to you last week about don't believe the hype. So, if you missed it, go back and watch it. I'm not going to talk about what I said last week. But every week as I sit in quiet contemplation and ask God, what should I pour into you? David came up again. And really, I wonder if you realize that God created you with a giant in mind that you and only you can crush. So, what do I mean by that? Of course, I'm talking David and Goliath, right? So, let me back up and give you some context to our story, tell you a little bit about David. And before I do that, here's our foundational Bible verse to our conversation for today. It's 1 Samuel 17. If you see me looking down, I have my Bible verses written down, so I have to go through my Bible, right? As I'm live with you. So 1 Samuel 17:46, that says, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. This is David talking to the giant. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. See, God created David to crush that giant the same way that there is something out there waiting for you to be the answer to it. So, give you context to who David is before he got to this Goliath moment. So, David was the youngest of 8 brothers. He was a shepherd out in the field. The rest of his brothers, I don't know what they were doing, sitting up with their feet up, drinking fruity drinks. I don't know. But what happened is there came a time when the king that was meant to be ordained, meant to sit on the throne, God was like, that ain't him. It's not him. That's not meant for him. There's somebody else that I have in mind. So God sent Samuel to Jesse's house. He said, he's in Jesse's house. Jesse was David's father. So when Samuel got to Jesse's house, again, David had 8 brothers. So Jesse brought his first son before Samuel. Samuel said, no, that's not him. Second, no, not him. Third, see, went all the way through the first 7 brothers. And then Samuel said, but wait a minute, don't you have another son that's not here? And you can read the whole story in 1 Samuel 17. It's 16. His story starts at 16. It goes on and on throughout Samuel, right? 1 Samuel. So listen, Jesse then sends for David, who's out in the fields tending to the sheep. He's a shepherd. Now, again, being a shepherd is a dirty job. He brings David in, and Samuel says, oh my God, that's him. He's the one that is to be king. So he gets anointed and then sent back into the field. The thing I think is interesting is what we don't realize is that when you are a shepherd, you're fighting lions. You're fighting wolves to keep your sheep safe. That's what a shepherd does. He watches his flock or sheep. And so when the giant came, now listen, think about it like this. This is the way I like to describe David and Goliath, because we've heard this story so much since we were children. So David, I always like to say he was little like Webster. Y'all remember Webster? Don't make me feel old. Google Webster if you need to. But imagine David was little like Webster. Some theologians say that he was 12 years old. Then there comes this big old giant. I always like to say the giant is like the rock times 10. Moment of silence for the rock with his fine self, right? But imagine how big The Rock already is. If he's The Rock times 10, I'm talking about Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Y'all with me? So if he's bigger than The Rock, he's huge, right? And so he is terrorizing the town. And listen, the army wouldn't fight him. The Navy wouldn't fight him. The Marines wouldn't fight him. Nobody, the police, nobody. They were like, no, no, I'm not fighting him. And here comes David. I'll fight him. See, what you have to understand is number one, this is making sure you understand that there's a giant that you are meant to crush. Number one, see, God plants a seed in each of us at birth. And that seed gets activated as we grow who we be. So David was meant to be a shepherd. He was born to be a shepherd. That shepherding equipped him to fight the giant. See, him being out in the shepherd fields equipped him. So fighting off a lion, I want y'all to realize fight off a lion is not an easy task. It sounds easy because I'm saying it out of my mouth, but imagine a real life lion, not Simba, not a lion that you know. Imagine if a lion is coming to eat one of your sheep and you're standing in between and you're fighting the lion to not eat your sheep. So him doing that prepared him to be able to stand in the face of the giant. See, he was ready when the time came, but the thing about it is he was developed. There was already a seed planted in him that he watered out in that shepherd field. And see, the more time he spent in the field, so even when he got anointed to be king, he didn't say, well, I'm supposed to be king. He went back into the field and kept doing what he knew he was meant to do, which was to be a shepherd. And I believe him being a shepherd made him a great king because he took such great care of his sheep. So when the time came and all these people were afraid, David had already been in the front of a lion, in the face of a lion. He'd been in the face of a wolf. Just imagine all the things that could come. So a giant, I could do that. If I could fight a lion, I could fight a giant. I'm sure that's what David said to himself. So the thing that I think is interesting, even in my own journey, when I think about who I've always been, what's interesting to me is when we each are born, God gives each of us DNA, distinct natural ability. And God is not asking you and calling you to crush any giant that is in contradiction to who you already are. But the question is, have you developed it? So when I think about myself as an example, when my 40th birthday, some years ago, my husband decided to do this roast, right? I was surprised. So he called my mom, and he and my mom were going through pictures of me. And what's interesting, my husband said, he told me this after the roast, because the pictures he used, every single picture of me when I'm little, I'm talking. Well, there's no coincidence that. What do I do for a living? I talk. When I was in elementary school, high school, I went to private school every single day. Those of you that went to private school, my name would be on that blackboard with all the checks for guess what? Talking too much. So every picture my husband looked at with me growing up, 3-year-old Nicole, 4-year-old Nicole, 5-year, he's like, dang, did you ever not talk? No. And even beyond that, the same picture that my husband really used and brought back to my memory, there's a picture I put in one of my books of me at 3 years old. God, I should have put it up here. 3 years old, I'm pushing a baby carriage. Now I'm talking in that picture, of course. But the other thing is, I don't have a baby in that carriage. I have books and papers because I've always, always, always been a natural born producer. When I worked in the entertainment industry, I was casting and talent management and producing because that's what I do with my clients now. I cast you in the right role for your gift. And we produce all the ways that people need the gift in you. Why am I talking about me? Because I want you to get that there's a seed already in you, that all you got to do is develop it. And when the time comes, when preparation meets opportunity, everything shifts. So then the next thing that happens, so number one, there's a seed in you that you've got to develop in order to crush your giant. I wonder if you realize that you are an answer, that God put you down here as the answer. That's a giant. And that giant for some of you may seem hard. It may seem like it's not possible. It may seem like, oh my God. But guess what? If you think about Ephesians 3:20, no, yeah, 3:20, I will do exceedingly abundantly above all you ask or think. So if God is going to do more than you can ask or think, he's going to do more with your gift, more in your life, more in your bank account. I can keep going on and more. So if it's bigger than what you can ask or think, it's going to cause a whole new level of you. And you've got to develop who you already are to get to that new level. Y'all get that? So listen, I believe that that giant that David crushed that day called Goliath prepared him to crush every giant as king. When there was division in the land, that was a giant he had to crush. When there was famine in the land, there was a giant he had to crush. Do I need to go on, or are y'all getting my point? That wasn't the last giant that David crushed. So the second thing, he had to grow the seed that God planted in him. The second thing he had to do was get strategy, right? Oh, wait a minute, I forgot to read the Bible verse that goes with the seed planting. I got so excited. So listen, Saul said to David, you are not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for you are youth, and he's a man of war. This is 1 Samuel 17:33-37. But David said back to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. So he was true to who he knew God created him to be. He was true to what he knew he was meant to do. He looked right in the face of that giant and said, I'm going to trust God, that I have everything I need to go after it. Which meant, number two, he had to be strategic. You know, what's interesting to me is I see so many people doing whatever, whenever, however. And you've got to understand, if you're not doing things in alignment with who God created you to be, it's not going to work. I don't care how good you are at it. I don't care how much money you spent to go to college. I don't care if you have a PhD. If it's not in alignment with what God created you to do or be, it will not work. Now listen, continuing with the same story. 17, 38 through 39. 1 Samuel 17, 38 through 39. So after David said all that to Saul, like, God's going to have my back when I go out there to fight. Here's what Saul did. So Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. So in other words, he gave him his whole armor to fight. So Saul was in the army. David's a little boy. Y'all with me? David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I can't walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. See, what David realized is I can't use somebody else's tools. I got to use the tools that I know. I got to be clear to who I am and who God created me to be, and understand that I have been developed for such a time as this. As I'm saying that, it makes me think of another of my favorite people in the Bible, Miss Esther. Take Esther's story really quickly because this is so good. And as Johnny Cochran would say, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. That's pretty much what David said to Saul. Don't fit, let it go. Right? Let me release this. This ain't for me. Doesn't mean you aren't meant to fight. It means you're meant to fight in your own strength. So even Esther. So Esther, favorite person in the Bible. My girl, those of you that have been around me, I talk about Esther a lot. I feel like Esther was my role model, right? So listen, Esther was an orphan, a Jew. Back then, a Jew could never become queen, kind of like Michelle Obama becoming the first lady of the United States from from south side of Chicago. From South Central LA. No, Nicole, that's where you're from. A little black girl from the south side of Chicago becoming the first lady of the United States. But she developed her craft. She developed herself. And so did Esther. So when her cousin Mordecai, who worked in the palace, heard that the king was looking for a new queen, I'm not going to go through the whole story. I'm going to tell you the quick Cliff Note version. The king started holding auditions, kind of like The Bachelor, right? Or The Bachelorette, or whatever you want to call it. Well, no, The Bachelor, because he started calling women from all over the land. And so what Mordecai did was change Esther's name from Hadassah to Esther. He took her Jewish name so the king wouldn't know she was a Jew. So she ran for queen and she won, to make a long story short. But listen, all she did was be who she already was. What made her stand out is she didn't try to be like any of the rest of those women. She was who she is. And she became queen. So then, as she became queen, Mordecai overhears the king's right-hand man, Haman, has a plot out to kill the Jews. And literally, Haman goes to Esther and says, oh my God, did you hear that your husband's homeboy is trying to kill us? Your husband's homeboy is trying to kill all your people, girl. And so literally, when Mordecai says to her in that moment of time, I'm pulling up because I didn't know I was going to share this. He says, For if you remain, this is Esther 4:14. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And many of you are staring in the face of you for such a time as this moment, but you want to sit in comfortable. You want to sit in good enough. You want to sit in mediocre. You want to sit in, oh, I don't know if it's time. And people are waiting for you. See, David could have chosen not to do it. But what he did was he got strategy. I believe he sat down, prayed, and God began to give him the strategy around the thing he knew how to do so well, which was a slingshot and a rock. It is from who he already was, what he already knew to do, that God used him to take down that giant, and the rest is history. So you've got to be strategic. You can't do whatever, whenever, however. The first thing you got to do is get clear on your DNA. Can I say this enough? Those of you that are with me week after week, you probably hear me say this ad nauseum, but I'm going to tell you the number of people that start businesses that do not take time to get clear, and they wonder why their business failed. Many of you are walking around on autopilot and you don't even realize what your brilliance is, let alone what it does, what your purpose is, because it's been with you. It's not something you go and you do take a class, but it's something you discover and you got to develop. It just doesn't happen because it's there. You got to take the time to grow it. So number one, you got to understand what is the seed that was planted in you at birth. The second thing is you got to get strategy around it. And all strategy ain't good strategy, especially when people tell you to be a cookie cutter. I'm going to give you the script. I want you to read it word for word. Well, that leaves out your secret sauce. What about the person that God created you to be? That thing that makes you who you are. Are there other people that do what you do? Yeah, but nobody does it like you. And the more time you spend getting clear on it, the more God can use you. To then go into point number 3. Now, before I go into point number 3, I have something special I want to invite you into. I'm doing something special next week, and it's called Power Your Pivot Week. It's an opportunity where I bring in 8 other people, all who have had to make a pivot, just like David did that day. All that knew that God was calling them into their next, and they took the time to get clear on what that next is. So hang tight. I'm going to play this commercial, and I'll be back to walk you through step number 3. Ooh, I'm pushing all the wrong buttons, y'all. Hold on tight. I'm pushing all the wrong buttons. Hold on. I'm in the wrong whole thing, so hold on. Here we go. Is 2022 the year you start or grow your purpose-focused business alongside your 9-to-5? Is 2022 your year of more? Would you get the motivation and inspiration you need by hearing from other successful people who have said yes and gone after their next level? Hi, I'm Nicole Roberts-Jones, and I'm inviting you to join me for Power in Your Pivot Week. Join us to hear from 8 phenomenally successful people, plus me, to give you insight, to help you show up powerfully and pivot into your next level. Listen, we're not coming for who you already are, but for whom you have not yet become. Only if 2022 is your year of more. Only if 2022 is your year of increase. Then join us as we support you and hold the space for you to go and get it. Starting on Monday, February 7th, and each night that week, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. EST. Join us by registering at powerinyourpivot.com. Yes, I get so excited sometimes, right? So listen. The reason why I do these conversations every week and I invite you to things like Power Your Pivot Week is because what I know for sure is I'm not here for you who you already are. I just told you that even David had to develop. If God was really strategic in making David be a shepherd, appointing him to be a shepherd, even appointing him to be king and then sending him back out in the field to be a shepherd. See, God knew what he was doing. He also knew that David had more development to do before he could sit on that throne. The same way that God has more development for you. And so then the last thing you've got to do, so let me walk you through the first 3. Number 1, you got to get clear on what is the seed that God planted in you. What is the purpose that you have on this earth? And then once you get clear on the seed and then you commit to grow the seed, you've got to, number 2, get strategy around it. Just doing whatever, whenever, however is not going to work. You've got to get strategy that's in alignment, not some cookie cutter from somebody else's DNA, but the strategy that is tailor-made for your own. I call that a blueprint. And then the last thing you got to do is do it afraid. You know, the thing that I love about David and even Esther's story is that David, do you think he wasn't scared to fight the Philistines? So what? He fought a lion. Who's to say he wasn't scared every time a lion, a bear, a wolf, or whatever came for a sheep? But he was more committed to his people than he was his fear. He was more committed to crush the giant that was terrorizing all his people than he was his fear. My question to you was, are you more committed to be comfortable, or are you going to go after your conviction? Because your comfort and your conviction can never coexist. Not if you're going to be all that God has purposed you to be. Not if you're going to go after you abundantly above all. Not if you're going to be the highest and best version of who God created you to be. Are you going to have to do it afraid? Again, I said this earlier. If you're going to go after you abundantly above all you could ever ask or think, think about that, y'all. It's bigger than what you could ever think. You can't fathom it. You wouldn't even ask to do it or for it. So if it's bigger than anything you could even fathom, then it's going to scare you. See, I believe God puts us in places so we have to trust him. That's why your ego, I talked about this last week, you cannot believe your own hype because your ego will have you feeling yourself. And when you feel yourself, you will fail. You know, last night I was watching the football game with my husband, let me make sure I say the right names of the teams, the St. Louis, Patrick Mahomes, I know the players, and the Cincinnati Bengals. And I'll tell you, my husband said the reason why Patrick Mahomes did not do well is he was feeling himself. He said, oh, he could have done so much better, but he thought he had it in the bag because they started and they were, those of you that watched, they were way out front in their score. And so they started thinking, oh, I got this, but they didn't have it. See, when you remain humble, you do the work that you're purposed to do, when you allow yourself to develop fully and completely. It's like taking that turkey out on Thanksgiving that's not ready yet. And it's pink on the inside, and everybody's sitting around the table with their knives and forks out hungry, and you're going to put it back in the oven. Sorry, y'all, might be a couple more hours. Who wants to say that to their family on Thanksgiving? I know I don't. And so that is why this conversation is so important. Will you crush your giant? Will you be the highest and best version of who God created you to be? Will you stand in the gap for the people that were waiting for you, like Esther? Esther had to choose. Listen, she said, if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. And what Esther did next is she got strategy. She said, listen, Mordecai, you go call all your people, all my people, you guys go pray. I'm going to pray with my handmaidens. And she prayed, and she prayed, and she prayed until she got strategy. And then even when she got strategy, she was really, really slow with it. She didn't rush it. She did the exact thing that she knew to do in the face of fear. Because she still, even though she knew, okay, this is God calling me to do, God never said, I'm not going to let you die. Now, see, we don't live in those kind of times, so God don't put us in places that we might die. But sometimes when you are going up against something that's so scary, failure is imminent, and you're afraid to fail. And God will never let you fail. Never. But do you trust him enough to be the parachute that will catch you when you feel like you're falling? And so that's our conversation for this week. Is what will you choose? We're still in the first days of 2022. Will you choose to stay in comfort, or will you go after living as the highest and best version of who God created you to be? Now, you guys know I always have more for you. So tomorrow morning, every morning, the day after our FPP lives, we dig deeper into the conversation in our Clubhouse sessions. So join me tomorrow morning on Clubhouse. Join me at FPPBreakfast.com. I always forget to make it, but you can go to Nicole on Clubhouse.com too. So tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. EST, every Tuesday morning, we dig deeper. I start the conversation here. I give you great context, and then we dig deeper into the topic on the next day in the morning. So with that said, I'm always honored and privileged and blessed to be able to be here. Anybody have any questions before I wrap for today? I'm trying to see my comments that aren't coming up. Hey, Media in DC. Anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments before we end? Hi, Tia. I hope I'm saying your name right, in Michigan, and Phyllis in Virginia. And I get to say hi to you at the top. Any questions? All right. So with that, I look forward to many of you joining me tomorrow morning on Clubhouse. Again, FPPBreakfast.com, or you can go to Nicole on Clubhouse.com. Either one, 8:30 a.m. EST. So with that said, that's our conversation for tonight. Part 2, digging deeper in tomorrow morning. All right. So with that, I'll leave you with this. When you die and go get to meet God face to face, Will he say to you, job well done, that you did it, that you are all that I purposed you to be? Or will he say, what happened? I'm disappointed in you. You didn't do it. See, I never want God to say that to me. I want to play full out so that the Creator is proud of everything I've done. And that's exactly why I hold this space for you in our conversations each week. So with that, I'll see you next week for another conversation, and tomorrow to dig deeper at 8:30 a.m. EST. Have a great rest of your Monday night, y'all. Bye.